Hello and welcome to another Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel Raish, your host. Very excited about a very special show today. One I've been wanting to do for years. I learned about the artwork and the beautiful icons that this man has painted. His name is Michael Galovic. He's prepared a book like this. You may have seen this around, Icons and Art, and it's won awards. And we're going to learn about him, a bit of his background and some of the artworks that he's done, but also what is an icon. And let's get an appreciation in this episode about the amount of work that goes into these things. It's a great form of art, but it's a great way to get in touch with God and the infinite and eternal. We're going to learn about that now. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hello, thank you.
So glad you can come in the flesh. I've known about your works for over 22 years now, and through a common friend, a former student of yours, Father Chris Alexander, who was my first ever spiritual director. I learned and learned about your icons through him. And he had some of his own works that he painted, and he said he learned from his teacher, and that was you. And just fell in love with him. And I actually have, he's given me an icon of Saint Charbel. I've seen, which is beautiful. And yeah, just want to thank you for the work you've done, the legacy you've got across the country. We see your work around the place. And so thank you very much for your contribution over the last 33 years in Australia and the church in Australia.
Thank you, Charbel, for your kind words. My pleasure.
I mean it. I want people to know a bit about your background. It's a colourful one. It's an adventurous one. You were born in Yugoslavia, but then you travelled for quite some time before coming to Australia. So could we just, a bit about your history there, upbringing, and what took you out of Yugoslavia to travel the world, learn countries and cultures. So could we get a bit about your upbringing there?
Yes. I recall when I was even in, I was born in Yugoslavia in 1949, graduated the Academy of Arts in 1974. But I recall talking about this sort of intrinsic, deeply seated need for traveling, even in from my secondary school. I would be daydreaming during the school time about another country where I would go. So I would go home and then say to my parents, I know where I'll go. I'll go to Greece. Then the following day I say, I know, I'll go to China. Then the next day I'm going to wherever. And then the fourth day my parents would kind of beat me to it, asking me, so okay, where are you going now? So the thing is that I'm one of those who do talk about their dreams, but I am also, fortunately enough, one who works on realizing those dreams, make them happen, really come true. So the moment I could, at the age of 20, I started traveling through Europe, and it did not stop ever since. From that point on. That was more or less also the time when I started painting icons, which is kind of curiously coincidental. So I managed pretty much the whole of Europe during my schooling time, and those 3 months that I had off at the Academy of Arts, like July, August and September, but then felt a need, an urge to see the beyond, remote countries, more exotic countries, much more than Europe. Europe was already kind of, how would I say, known and predictable, although it's not a good way to say it, because it is so rich and so sated in the history and quality that we always go back to it. So that before I graduated, actually, I decided that I would quit art, because it was obvious that if you want to do something in art, you have to dedicate yourself fully and more than fully to the art making. And then with a completely insecure prospects whether you would make something there or not make. There are many artists, and to make living out of it was difficult. And I kind of traded easily for the two other loves that I had, that obsession for traveling and interest and love for languages. So I did combine the two over 15 years. So no, I got the diploma, as I said, then started traveling to remote countries and living there actually. So you asked me earlier, what did I do there? Well, in Spain over 3 years, I was a tour guide and supervisor. And the only reason why I stopped doing that is just because the economy in Yugoslavia went down in the 1980 and they stopped doing the tourism there in Spain, and I was revoked to the country. Otherwise, I would have stayed my whole life in Spain. I was absolutely besotted by Spain.
Wow.
Then I went to Iraq as a translator for a constructing company. The Iraq led to Libya. Before that, I went to Libya first and then to Iraq for 2 years. So all in all, between Libya and Iraq, it was 3 years.
Translator from
Translator
what
from Serbian to English and English to Serbian, which also led me afterwards for the same company to be a translator for French in the Francophone Africa, in Gabon and Ivory Coast.
Wow.
So that was like another 3 years and another few years that I was working as a translator in the office there. But because I always wanted to live elsewhere, and I don't know exactly why, because there was nothing wrong either politically or economically in my life, I just simply thought that the paradise must be somewhere else, but certainly not where I am. So I came to Australia and loved the place so much, embraced the place so much soon after or upon our arrival that I decided to stay here, and that makes those 33 years that I have been here. So
why do you say that? What makes Australia so nice? That's an interesting one for Australians to appreciate, but to anyone who's wanting to come here.
It is a question that I would answer, that I am answering now actually differently than I was to answer 33 years ago. First of all, I can talk only in retrospect, only about Sydney. So I kind of landed in Sydney, and I, for some odd reason, landed in the eastern suburbs, and I didn't know a single person in Australia. And that was very good. I liked the fact that I started from the absolute zero, not knowing anybody, not understanding anything, and not understanding the lingo and stuff like that. Anyway, so some pensioners took a shine on me and had time for me, took me around, and after 2 or 3 days, I could not believe that Sydney is basically the type of place which I always wanted, like a great climate. The topography is interesting, like it's dynamic, it's not a flat place.
Yes.
We have parks in the city, we have beaches in the city. I just couldn't believe it. Yeah. And also I liked the pace. I liked the fact that it was not overdeveloped. Yes. I liked the fact that it was not over-polluted, over-regimented as it is now. And the fact that I could leisurely go by car to the city and park there somewhere in the center, do my stuff, then go back, and everything was so kind of nice and relaxed. So that was Sydney then. Sydney now is something that is quite different, and that made me, after 10 years living in places like Bondi Junction and Bondi, made me leave Sydney for the Central Coast, where I have a house, home, and studio, because it was impossible to deal with Sydney anymore. It was just simply too big a place. Yeah. So also it coincides with the timing, the age. I was 50 when I left Sydney, so I'm now 73. So it's just a natural urge to be closer to the nature, to have more peace, which is more conducive to what I do, more space. I couldn't have that in Sydney. So That
beautiful. Central Coast is quite beautiful.
Central Coast is nice.
On the coast there as well, you've got the ocean not too far from.
That's correct. Yes, I'm near next to the Tagara Lake that goes into the ocean. So it is a wonderful setting, so to say. So.
Yes, yeah. Why was Australia on your? Why did you come to Australia? Was it just
no. Australia definitely was not on my wish list for some reason. It was just on recommendation of somebody that I come to Australia for 6 months. Then it was possible as a tourist and see for myself. He recommended Sydney highly, and I kind of semi-reluctantly came, thinking that it's just too far or whatever it is. I don't know what I thought. But all of those things dispersed when I came. I said, I love the place. For some reason, I embraced it really wholly, truly.
Fantastic. Now, you got into, so you as an artist, so you said you left away. You did get back in Australia. So what sparked your interest or that sort of desire again to get back into the arts? And do you remember then Icon specifically? How did that happen?
Yes. I did say that I traveled around and lived around for kind of 15 years. But I also would, these jobs were all like contract jobs, or even when they were not contract, when I was a permanent employee of some company, I would still come back to my place in Belgrade and maybe take an unpaid leave for months, and then I would just paint icons all the time, because I thought if I decided to quit art, which I was quite strictly adhering to, I am not quitting on icons because icons are not art. That's how I kind of explained it to myself. And I'm still kind of behind that statement. So I was sort of maintaining that kind of flame. And as I said to you earlier, when I got to Australia, there was an itch just before I came to Australia to resume art. But obviously I had to shake off the rust of those 15 years of not making art. I thought that that is completely my personal return, if you like. Nothing to do with living, really. I couldn't imagine living on art at that point in time. So I then found the work as a, translator again, interpreter rather, for a company in Sydney, and also the teacher or teaching the painting of icons in evening colleges and other colleges. And that kind of was enough to sustain me and gave me the possibility to work during the daytime on icons and other art. Soon after my arrival here in Australia, I experienced something that was quite epiphanic, quite profound, and something that shook me to the core that I didn't tell you earlier. So when that thing happened, when I kind of figuratively woke up from that event, I felt an enormous, how would I say, floodgate opening. The enormous energy was released, and suddenly enormous quantity of ideas and the energy for creation, artistic creation, was released. And that is the time when that I mentioned earlier to you, that I could not even sleep because of so many ideas. And I started behaving a rather kind of strange. In a sense, I wouldn't accept any kind of commitments or meetings during the day because I needed the daylight for work.
Yes.
And I also refused to go to art exhibitions because I had my own ideas, and I did not want any kind of outer influence. That's how I thought, at least then. And for kind of a number of years, I wouldn't even go to the exhibitions. I was kind of relying on my own art and trying to find myself completely from within after shaking that rust of not doing art, and then embarking on a new road kind of that was ahead of me, so that I resumed the art practice on a, again, obsessive level. Again, as I said before, as if I'm now supposed to make up for the lost time, which was absolutely not lost. It was a huge experience that only actually helped me, me focus and being completely relaxed about the world, not having a good idea what's going on in the world. So I did not need to worry about it anymore. So I was fully focused to what I was doing. And
that does help, doesn't it? I mean, the experience of your worldview through your life experience is very valuable, and you can't underestimate. Do you know how many countries you visited? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Many, yes, but I never...
The dozens, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can only talk about the other way around. I can only tell you countries that I haven't been to, which is not a fancy way of saying anything. It is true, really.
Wow.
And but I also, my idea of traveling, Charbel, was to kind of spend more time in those countries. I always wanted to live in those countries.
You weren't just passing through like the tourist for
a
week. And,
I don't like the ticking off like thing, like yes, like visiting some country in passing and then thinking that you have been to some country. You know actually nothing about it. So I like to live in the country and feel the language, feel the people, feel the culture, feel the food and stuff like as much as I could, of course. Yes. So that goes until now.
And you learned the language. What are the language barrier? Because your native language is Serbian.
That's right. Yes, my mother's tongue.
Spain. You were there for years. You learned Spanish fluently.
I knew actually Spanish before. That's how I got the job. I simply studied Spanish for my own interest. And at the time, there was hardly anyone in Belgrade who spoke Spanish. And so I got the job as somebody who speaks Spanish for the Spain there.
Wow.
And so after 3 years of there, I kind of, was pretty good with it. And then in Iraq, of all places, I managed to master my French because my constructing company worked with French companies.
Wow.
And so I was forced to speak French and study and know French 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and for 2 years. So I came out of that as a fully fledged translator for French. That's how I was sent to Gabon and Ivory Coast. Okay. And as such, basically, I came to Australia. My French was better than English when I arrived here. Okay. And especially when we think of the lingo that I mentioned, the Australian lingo, like we are cooking with gas or things like that. That was absolutely for me.
Love the sayings, and it's very hard in English.
Spasmodic.
Some of the exceptions to the rule we have, and especially in Australia, we have even more sayings than you would pick up in America or England.
Absolutely. So it was fun.
So
that was the 4 languages. Wow. Plus afterwards in Australia, when I settled in, I continued that wish and that language kind of a quest. So I studied Greek, contemporary Greek for a year, and I studied Japanese for a year because I was for 4 years part of the so-called tea ceremony, which is called actually the way of tea in Japanese, chado, or chanoyu if you like. So I continue with these things. In a sense, I am planning to go to Japan to study it more, and to Greece as well, like to be in situ, to continue my studies in situ. So this is my continuation of interest for languages.
I mean, being of a Serbian background, and obviously, is there a natural love for your country? But then Australia, you mentioned being a resident here. Are there other countries like was Spain a highlight? Are there highlights in this time of your life that you cherish, sort of stand out? Maybe yes.
I didn't think about that. Spain definitely is there, and also Latino world. As you know, I spent years in Ecuador and even have strong connections with Ecuador.
Fantastic.
I'm
south of
drawn to the
Colombia.
Latino world for some reason, Hispano world, if you like, be it Spain or Latino America. I don't know why. I feel at home there.
Yeah,
Especially
interesting.
because my wife is Chilean, no?
Yes.
Obviously, being with her, I kind of have that connection
Yeah,
more
beautiful.
realized.
Oh, fantastic. Now, so you were painting icons throughout your life there before coming to Australia. You kept
That's
it
right.
going. What do you have a memory? Do you know what the first icon you did was?
Strangely enough, I do. It is a small icon of. It was a small icon of Archangel Michael that I can show you in some of the books. It is in the Trechakov Gallery in Moscow, and I saw it in the original a few years ago when I went to the icon tour there.
Beautiful.
Probably the reason for picking up that particular one was just because it belongs to the simplest possible icons that Russia kind of, or Russian styles have produced. It is mainly a linear work, and so I got probably an urge to make an icon, and then I made the simple icon, and that was my first
Yeah, beautiful.
of those icons.
Now you have a beautiful book here, Icons and Art, and interesting, you distinguish the two. So icons and art. Can I ask you, before I even open this page to show some of our viewers, what is an icon and why isn't it considered art? Is it not art? So what's the difference?
Sure. We would not be able to function in the world without definitions and classifications. I am only fully aware of that. But the older I am getting, the more reluctant I am to dwell on definitions. So even my own distinction between icons and art is a complex question and has to be explained more properly. But let's say briefly, icons are, there is no accepted definition of icons. Maybe the closest to it we could get the sacred art, or my own one is the sacred through art, or something like this.
The sacred through art.
Through art, that's right.
That's a beautiful definition.
How do we get to sacred?
Yes.
We get through art. So it's not
Yes.
like shoemaking or something else. It's just through art we get there.
Yes.
But what is art? We don't know actually what is art in a sense. Many people would come up with different definitions. But let's say art in general, outside of icons, could be simply a manifestation of our own nature, our own thoughts, our own desires, our take on the world, whatever is the thing, through artistic means, like through paints, through drawings or drawing tools, or whatever it is. So art is completely free, general art is completely free to express oneself in any way whatsoever.
Yes.
That could be the closest kind of fair, or the fairest definition or description. Whereas icons are actually a very specific situation wherein we have the whole structure. We have the idea of representing. Firstly, it has to be said it is a sacred Christian art, not just sacred art, because there are other sacred arts. So it's not sacred Buddhist art or any other art, but Christian art, through the heavy structure and the rules that we kind of whether like to believe that are imposed on us or imposed on ourselves, the rules that we call canons, and that is all like a different ball of game to talk about. But we have to adhere to them if we want to call something an icon. If we do not, then we can come up with the most wonderful religious painting of the world. We can get the Blake Prize in Australia. We can be Leonardo da Vinci, who makes the, I don't know, Last Supper, and that's all phenomenal as art. But that is not an icon, because icons, an icon has a very specific way of presenting the world. So there we come to the third definition, I guess. What makes what you asked earlier? in our conversation, what makes icons different to the religious art?
Yes.
Well, in a nutshell, maybe in an open, non-iconic religious art, anybody and everybody is free to present saints, Christ, Mary, scenes from Christianity in any way whatsoever. There are no rules. Simply in religious art, whether traditional or new, especially the contemporary or modern, there are no rules. So you decide to come up with Christ in a purple gown or Christ laughing or smiling, that's perfectly all right from that point of view, from that angle. But in icons, actually you can't do that. You can't do what you would like to maybe. For instance, you feel like painting Christ, I don't know, with blue eyes and laughing and smiling and, I don't know, in any kind of other situation. So you present it like that, as it has been represented in especially Protestant art, in America especially. And it brings a nice memory to one of my workshops when I said, well, in icons, to the students, in the icons, the facial features are, unlike in other religious paintings, are never like a blue or green, like meaning eyes specifically. They're always kind of brown, auburn, or something like that.
Interesting, yeah.
And one lady said, but Michael, it's a common knowledge our Lord had blue eyes. That is that is so funny. This is the famous so-called Aryan concept of Christ, Christ with blue eyes, Christ that we can sort of identify with, Christ who smiles or laughs or who is relaxed, who is this or the other, whatever. But it is not a traditional icon the way the Byzantium, that glorious culture of over 1,000 years, was representing things. So what actually icons try to achieve? The religious art in general tries to, especially of the West, that we have to distinguish now, tries to depict the events from the Gospels, from the Christian drama, in a so-called historical way. How would I say? The way they think events happened 2,000 years ago, the way they think apostles looked like, and all sorts of things like that, the way they think Christ looked like, and also. That's all very fine, but that is the so-called the human nature of Christ. So we are depicting just one part of Christ and the other protagonists of the Christian drama. We are painting them as people, so as normal people like you and I. So when Christ is depicted in a crucifixion in the Western art, he is obviously suffering enormously, profusely. He's bleeding heavily. He's in agony. We are kind of empathizing with him, and that's all fine. But this is only one side of Christ. This is the human nature of Christ. Icons don't worry about that. It is phenomenal. It is spectacular that the icons, from the very beginning of Christianity, chose to depict the Christian drama. Again, I'll use that word, that expression, in order to show us not the saints and Christ and Mary as humans like they are today among us, or like they were 2,000 years ago, but as already sanctified, as already beginning to another realm, transfigured.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? So they try to actually go back to Christ. We said the West depicts just the human nature of Christ. The East tries to depict the fusion of human and divine natures of Christ without confusion and without separation. It is nice as a, I don't know, definition,
profound
statement, all this, and it's an old statement, it's not mine, but it is an impossible task. Why it is impossible? Because we know for sure that it is impossible to paint the divine or to depict the divine. We know that. We accept that. It is the premise we kind of consciously use. But so what are we doing? We are trying to get as closer as we can in icons, depicting that kind of fusion by distorting the reality of this world. That means we do depict saints as kind of human beings. There is anatomy there. There is, facial features are recognizable, but there is definitely an element of distortion, not only because of the elongation of figures or sometimes the other way around, making them smaller or shorter, just simply not anatomically plausible, not anatomically realistic. The way they look like, the way they are depicted is different from this reality. Then the architecture is deliberately distorted to the point that it looks like a surrealistic kind of backdrop. And that is what you asked me about. We can mention that about the perspective. So the perspective of the perspective in the Western art is of the horizon that starts and finishes, starts from where we are, from the viewer's point of view, and finishes somewhere in the horizon, disappearing there. But the icon painters or icon writers, as people like to call them, use the different types of perspective, one of which is the main one, which is the inverse perspective, making you part of the viewer, that is, part of the icon that you are seeing, and then there is no horizon basically that is showing anywhere. There is simply an ether, or the golden background is two-dimensional, so to say.
Yes.
So the icon is not disappearing anywhere. The saint is there with you, and you're both disappearing in some sort of imaginary, if you like, cosmos or whatever you like to call it, divine realm. And that is also where you asked me why icons are called the windows to eternity or windows to the kingdom, capital K. It is because precisely when the parishioners, especially, the parishioners in the church, let's say Orthodox Church, stand in front of the iconostasis, which is a must for any Orthodox Church, Christian church, and Melkite, for instance, then they are seeing the world, basically, of icons, which is completely surrealistic, different from this world. And that is exactly the world that we, hopefully, all Christians are aspiring to. So the icons are those means to kind of basically show us or indicate or hint what is behind, really.
Beautiful.
And that is why we call it the windows to eternity.
I love that.
Yeah, it is wonderful. But there is even some more than that, Charbel. A good friend of mine, a monk priest, Father John McPherson, had a tremendous idea. He says, yes, but on top of that, imagine windows to eternity. Imagine you are gazing through the window. Yes, you are seeing through the window, through some sort of eternity and whatever is behind the glass, but you also see the reflection of yourself, which is wonderful, because you are part of the, how would I say, part of the attempt. You are the attempt yourself of going to that kind of eternity. And you can see that, you can see yourself, your reflection there on the window through which you want to go to the eternity, or through which you see
Like
the hints of eternity.
Drawn in,
so you are part of that story.
Yes.
So you can see yourself going there.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Experience.
So now, all of those most wonderful, I will go back to the other elements of icon, but before I forget, all of those wonderful statements and wonderful definitions, they're all terribly exciting and eloquent and whatnot, and erudite. But let us not forget, you and I here are now talking about icons. So these are not icons. This is our talk about icons. So now I'm conveying you, trying to tell you what I think icons are, and I'm trying to tell you my experience about icons, but this is the verbal, intellectual situation. So and it is my own. And now, what I want to say that there is no categorical or categoric definition that has to be accepted unanimously about what an icon is. The icon is what do you want it to be. So, meaning, for me, after 53 years of doing them, it is one thing, and for somebody who started yesterday, who has no idea about what he is doing, it is completely another thing. Somebody takes it on with great reverence. Somebody, like I had a couple of art teachers in my classes, when they saw the icon, the print of Saint Luke that we are to make, they said, "And who is the dude?" Well, that's what it is. So people react differently to different things. So now to just briefly touch on, I touched on architecture. I can touch on landscape as well. Behind the saint or something, the landscape is mostly lunar, looking like lunar or similar, deliberately, as I said, distorted so that it shows the reality of some other kind of context, not of this world. So these are not the real mountains, these are not the real trees. There are some strange, odd trees, and the stranger and the odder the whole thing looks like, the more iconic actually it is. So the objects as well, like they're all, as I said, part of that different, 2-3 different types of perspectives. And also the icon can have many different focal points, which is something immanent to Cubism, if you like. So there are precursors to Cubism, it can be said. They're precursors to Surrealism because they use these things. And they are precursors to actually Expressionism in art. For instance, you would have, let's say, something color, let's say, ochre or yellow. And then on top of that, the highlight is blue or green. It is something that we saw being used in the Expressionism or German Expressionism that started as the beginning of the big movement that tries to this day. That kind of thing of painting complementary colors on certain colors is stuff that icons did from the 12th century or 13th century, and nobody talks about it. So icons are very innovative, very modern, etc., and so forth. They also use bold red colors, but those red colors are neither the symbol of communism nor the boldness of some sort of courageous take on life in the world, but they're the symbols of divine. Red is the symbol of divine in icons, symbol of martyrdom, and the symbol of resurrection. So we have to know exactly what are we doing. That's why I said you cannot paint icons the way you just feel like. No. So, for instance, there are rules. So if you
have to study these, is that something you had to?
You have to know that in order to claim that you are getting anywhere with icons, so to say.
I have to bring up my attempt of an icon, and this was about 20 years ago, thanks to Father Chris showing me. I don't know if the camera could see this, Miguel, but it's not complete. It's Saint Luke. Following some of the rules, I still got to do the background and the gold plate and sign it, and the shades of the skin. There's a bit of cockroaches were eating a bit of the paint. But, you know, what do you think, Michael? I've started. Am I on track here? How do I improve this one?
I don't know, but improving. It's about never letting go, never stopping in the course, finishing what you start once.
Well, I better finish because it's going to remain unfinished if I don't. It's been 20 years, so still not complete. So.
But
anyway,
that's part of your experience. That's okay.
On a board, and we want to talk about some of this. You touched on, we can't just talk about icons. We also can't just, and I know you're passionate about this, just print off or look at a digital version of an icon. There is an experience that you talk about of a real icon. Can we just touch that? I mean, so the process in creating an icon, it's not something you just sort of take a photo of and move on. It's not a quick sort of 20-minute sketch. Tell us about what goes into these, and because it's profound detail.
Yes. If I, how would I say, if I say the way it is, it would sound a little bit too dramatic and too presumptuous, maybe, to somebody, but it isn't. Let's say, before I answer that, I will just start with an analogy.
Yes.
We all go to the dentist, and then that dentist, whoever he, she is, does the job in, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes, more or less. And if it is like a minor problem, then we say thank you, we pay, we sometimes pay too much, we think, or whatever. Then we go home, and maybe we can think of the dentist as somebody who did his or her job in 20 minutes. But to get there, that dentist, whoever he, she is, had to study for 7 years the dentistry, then needs minimum 10 years of practice to know what they are doing properly without really having problems, and to be able to effect in 20 minutes what needs to be done without hesitation. There are no doubts. There is no room for doubts.
Yes.
So why the analogy is because we are, how would I say, very much focused to the linear time, and maybe even obsessed with linear time. So the question that I often get, if not all the time, is how long does it take you to make an icon? And I really have problems with that one, and I started writing about that, and I have texts that kind of try to answer the question. First of all, it is an impossible question to answer because it depends on many factors, like many variables are in the story, like how big is the icon, how complex is the icon, is it just a head or 20 odd figures in the scene, like Ascension or something like that. The size can be like 2 meters. My icons are sometimes 2 meters high or tall. So it is just an impossible question to answer. But this is not the point, and even those variables are not the point. Because, for instance, you asked me about the first icon that I have done, and I said Saint Michael, very linear, simple, deluding myself that I did or made an icon, and I did, but this was just a scratching on the vastness of my ignorance as a beginner, as any beginner. So I was simply unable to do anything better at that time. So the time factor, the time question was not on at all. So it doesn't really matter how long does it take you to make an icon. It is actually the whole your life that you put into that, your understanding of icons, that then you physically deliver in, I don't know what, question of weeks or months, depending on the piece.
Yes. Yes.
But it is not actually, again, go back those weeks or months. It is the whole your life. Because at some point you are able to deliver something, to make an icon really complex, to the point of getting admiration of everybody, as opposed to the beginning of the most simple thing that really anybody can do. Yeah, it's a complex question, but the thing is, what you and I talked about is my issue with how would I say, with overuse of reproductive so-called icons or religious art, when or where we can avoid it.
Yeah.
So when somebody alive with all their life experience and knowledge and in good intentions and all this enormous effort tries to make something really decent, that should show, kind of thing. And that energy of the maker, who is considered not really just a maker, but let's more like an instrument of something that goes through you, comes to in a form of a finished so-called icon. That thing is completely different from, if I may, yes, let's say, completely different from, let's say, where do we put it like this? Is it better? Or
yes,
maybe that there. Yeah. It is completely different from the original. So here we have a wonderfully reproduced, from the printer's point of view, from the photographer's point of view, wonderfully reproduced piece, which consists of several so-called betrayals to the reality. The first betrayal is by the photographer, meaning the best photographer in the world will make the best photo reproduction of the original, but it cannot ever be exactly as the original by the nature of it.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with the abilities of the photographer or quality of the camera. It just simply is not the same thing. And it always finishes by being relatively flat as opposed to the original. Then we get the printer who is doing their job with the printing means, and that again has to kind of aims to reproduce that same photograph in a best possible way, and invariably finishes by doing something slightly different than the original, and all sorts of things like that. Whereas, so how do you make a difference? Well, simply place this reproduction next to the original and you will see what I'm talking about. So when you go to the church and you are a very devout Christian, you tend to kiss, you tend to touch the icon, because we Christians, we feel need to kind of get closer to the divine and be part of the drama. People do that these days with reproductions because that's what they find, that's what they come across in churches. So my point that I'm trying to make is this: if the church, and when the church or an individual is poor enough or not rich enough to pay an original, I can understand the need for reproductions. But I know from direct experience, because that's my living, I only do this.
Yes.
Meeting with people, meeting and all this, I know that most of those people, not only that they can afford commissioning an icon for at least one icon for their home or something for the personal devotion, or to donate it to the church where it would be duly revered, if you like. Those people, many of those people can buy me the way I sit here in this chair, let alone my icon. So it is not about just that money that I don't even like to mention so much. It is about availability, about the information, about the knowledge that those things can be found, can be commissioned, can be acquired. And many people told me that we didn't actually know it was possible. We thought it was only possible in churches and that it only goes to the churches. But we didn't know that the personal devotion is also, just Miguel, we can show another one. Thank you, if you like.
It is a beautiful...
So I am sorry.
You've got different styles here. And let's talk about that.
What
is this one
This is
called?
an incredibly important thing, and I completely forgot to mention, because we're talking about something else. This is the icon called Dodeca Orton, or Christ and Dodeca Orton. Dodecaorton means 12 feasts in the Greek language. It's the type of icon of Christ with, that's kind of variable. 12 feasts, his own feasts from his life around him. Could be less, could be more, but usually 12. And this, strangely enough again, is the first and still the only icon of this sort in Australia. I don't know why nobody wanted to take on this kind of complex thing. And also it's good for our talk to know that I felt confident enough and, how they say, good enough to do this only after, let's say, 45 years of doing this.
Wow.
Before I wouldn't even consider it, I wouldn't even have it for consideration to do something like that. So I had to be ready. And when I was ready a few years ago, I just did it. And I am delighted and elated that I have done that. And the next one that I will do will be of Mary or Theotokos, Mother of God, with 12 feasts around as well. Wow, again, that would be like the equivalent or counterpart of this same one. So
the original, how large is the original?
1 meter by 70 centimeters.
Wow.
And so to say, unfortunately, it was commissioned by one of my greatest clients, an individual, good Catholic, who keeps it in his home. And I decided from this point on that I will not actually do this kind of complex projects anymore for individuals, but for the churches or public places where those things are accessible to wider public, I believe. Not because I would like to, how they say, spread the greatness of my own work, but just because it is an important thing which we don't have much in Australia. No. So if we keep it only private, only individual, it is okay, but it remains as the individual devotion, isn't it? Like it is maybe time for, in this particular era that we are, where we need more of a boost, evangelical kind of boost, that we get more in touch with the representations of the divine.
I agree.
So this was the Christ, and in the center is my replica or my version of the famous Christ from Sinai, the 6th century, considered the oldest, well, one of the oldest icons in the history. And the Christ with the famous asymmetrical eyes. By the way, asymmetry is one of the points of the Byzantine art, if you like, iconic art, that is. So this is that bit, but we also needed to show to the public, if possible, just briefly at least, the icon of Mother of God, Theotokos, or Mary, that we call her in the Catholic kind of vernacular or lingo. It is important because, again, when the Western art is depicting Mary, and Mary with child especially, we always depict her in a most tender and well-intentioned way of making her looking beautiful, young, and all this that she was. But again, this is just her human nature.
Yes.
Now, what the icons do is they always depict her in a way that she's concerned, she's apprehensive, because even if she's with a child who is playful or not playful, she's constantly worried and apprehensive about his future passion on the cross. That is completely unique to the icon world. So she's never smiling. People in icons, saints, Christ, Mary, they're never smiling. Their lips are closed in some sort of eternal kind of tacit silence that holds certain mystery. So because smiles and other expressions would make them more human, and remember, we wanted to depict them as sanctified already, being outside of this world that we are here. And maybe the last one, I just mentioned something. it is not an icon, and it is good for our public to see that, because there is nothing iconic about that. It is a crucifixion based on famous Gauguin's crucifixion, or the so-called Yellow Christ by Gauguin, wherein I inserted the uluru. I'm showing this to show that this is art. So in art, everything is possible, everything is admissible, and it's all fine. It looks maybe interesting, very attractive. Many people found it attractive, stuff like this. It was even displayed in the Blake Prize one year. But this is not an icon because it does not conform to those intricacies and the structure that we need from the art. And it shows more like of the artisticness of the man who made it, rather than a higher truth.
Yes.
So an icon painter has to sacrifice his own thoughts on the subject when he's depicting something from the iconic kind of spectrum. Say, for instance, we know that Judas is like theologically taken as a traitor, and then so when in icons you depict Judas, you always have to depict Judas. We can even find it in the book in full profile, and an icon never shows people in profiles. Always shows people, even if they are 3/4 profiles. You have to have the communion or communication with both eyes. You have to see both eyes of the saint.
Yeah.
Theologically, the full profile is considered as absence or the sin, and that's why Judas was basically branded or castigated in the iconic world by being in the profile when in the Last Supper. That's kind of scene. Yeah.
Fascinating. Now, just in closing, I wanted to give a taste that you're working on. Now, the Icon book is out now, and people can see that, but you are now releasing, working on something in the future. We're going to give a sneak peek, but to show more of your icons, and just to sort of give a little overview, this is just a sampler, but and again, these are sort of images of your original work, which are displayed across the country. We don't really know the amount out there,
no.
But it's somewhere in the hundreds, hundreds and hundreds. But you have, these different ones. Just very quickly, if we haven't got much time, but this one here, the Annunciation.
Yes, I would need to maybe then clarify. The first book that you mentioned was published in 2000, by the end of 2006. It is now time, after 15 or so years, to publish the next one, which will contain an altogether new material.
Okay.
And it will be much more ambitious project, much bigger, and hopefully done with Parousia, maybe as a publisher. But the point is that the book will be conceived the way it's divided in segments. The first one is the Annunciation,
yes,
announcing the good tidings. Then the next one is the Son of Man, about Christ. Yeah, the Son of Man, and the next one is Theotokos, or Mother of God. The next one is selected icons. Then we have the Uluru kind of segment, and finally the major projects. So it is a very kind of, as I said, ambitious project, but it should contain everything or most of the things that I have done in the last 16, 17 years, I guess.
Wow. You've been busy, I have to say. You have been very, very busy. And it's been, what a wonderful contribution. Just so much the saints, Our Lady, our Lord. It's just, it does exactly what you say. It takes you out of this world into the divine. It really draws you above to the supernatural. It's not something you just look at and flick past. And I'm not doing it justice here. We're just trying to help our viewers and listeners to appreciate what it is that goes into an icon, but what is the icon doing as well, sort of perpetually, ongoing, eternally. It's a beautiful concept. That's an ancient concept too. For the last 2,000 years, we've got icons in our church history. You managed to even take your artwork and the icons, and you created cards. And then behind us here, we've got just a selection of some of your work in card form. So they're available too. We have them on our website, Parousia website, and they're good quality cards people can use for birthdays or anniversaries or whatever. I love giving, St. Nicholas on Christmas. And I love doing, Easter and all those themes, or ordination feast. But yeah, they're wonderful, wonderful. Look, I can't speak highly enough, Michael, about your work. I want to thank you for everything you've done. I hope we can do this again, maybe a part 2, and have a proper display of everything. But any just final thoughts as we close here for our viewers and listeners to take away?
Well, first, I'm really grateful for this possibility to again talk about icons. But I guess what we mentioned, what we touched on earlier, the difference between the original and the reproductions in any form, can be best seen at some presentation here, possibly, wherein I would bring some originals so that people would really understand what I am talking about.
Yes, let's do that.
So they can see the icons from close, have a close inspection, and understand better what goes into making them, and get a better appreciation of what are we talking about here.
Absolutely.
So maybe one day we do the presentation later in the year. I don't know.
That would be wonderful. Absolutely. Let's do. So our website, people can see you have a website, michaelgalovic.com.
That's right. But mostly my work, because that website is terribly obsolete, not updated for years. The best is to go to YouTube. Therein you just type in Michael Galovic, and you will get a number of video clips, especially the film called Short Happy Life of Michael Galovic, and that will show you basically the spectrum of what I do.
Thank you so much again. Well, I've got a feeling when I see you again more often and your artwork. So thank you again. God bless you.
Pleasure.
And I want to thank everyone. Thanks. I hope you were inspired and learned a little bit about icons today, as I have. And the journey continues. This is only the beginning. Get in touch with us. Please pray for his work and visit us at parousiamedia.com. Get one of these cards that you see behind me. They're a great gift for others. And until next time, please pray for this project for book number 2, and go out there and see some of these icons. There are a lot in the sense of a few hundred, but still not many as far as the landscape of Australia. Would love to make sure that this becomes a legacy and it becomes, revive it again. Let's do that. So God bless you. I'm Charbel Raish. Until next time, take care.